when I was 15, I was in a really bad mental headspace. With that being said, I was depressed, lonely, and desperate for anyone's attention. Against my own better judgment, I made an account on Plenty of Fish. I understand that I put myself in a dangerous position for predators, but I also understand that any man who I told my age should have reported my account and not spoken to me at all. After swiping left and right for about an hour, I met a man I'll call Red. Red was 26, a father of 2 beautiful toddlers, and a Puerto Rican native who had recently moved to Florida. He spoke a fair bit of English and had this charm to him whenever he spoke. When I told him my age, it's scary now to think about just how okay he was with it. He simply told me we would not have any sexual relations, and our interactions would be 100% innocent. We talked for a few months before even mentioning meeting up. When I talked to Red, I felt happy, whole, like I finally had someone supporting me. The first few times we met up, it was perfectly fine. We went to the outlets, Disney Springs, the movies. He was a perfect gentleman. He held my hand, opened doors for me, and kept his hands off me too. We did kiss a bit, but it was never anything too intense. About 6 months into our relationship, I turned 16, and I invited him over to my house, through means of sneaking in my window, of course. He agreed wholeheartedly. We were just hanging out watching a movie when he kissed me in a way he never had before, in a way I'd never been kissed before. It was surprising, and without having to be said, overwhelming. I started to get scared. It finally hit me that this was a grown man, and I was still just a child. I got off my bed and told him he had to leave. I wasn't ready for this. His face immediately contorted into anger, and he stepped towards me, trying to convince me through gritted teeth not to make him leave. He reached out to grab my shoulders, and out of instinct, I shoved his chest to make him back off, only for a harsh shove to be returned right at me. A hot, sharp pain suddenly overwhelmed me, spreading from the back of my head and down the rest of my body. Then everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was hearing a blood-curdling scream. Hazed out and too weak to open my eyes fully, I could just barely tell it was my mom. I felt a wetness on my head, and my body felt so cold now. It was just as I gathered that something was really wrong, that I lost consciousness again. The following time that I awoke was in a hospital bed. My head was pounding and aching in the back. I reached up hazily to feel where the pain was coming from, and my fingertips grazed a row of staples on a now bald patch on the back of my head. It made me wince. Things went by fast from that point on. A doctor and my mother and father explained that I must have slipped and hit my head on the windowsill, being that's where the first impact was made. Before falling the rest of the way onto my floor, my mom had come to my room to wake me up for school in the morning and found me laying there in a pool of my own blood. She thought I was dead because my breathing was so faint. They had no idea as to why I'd slipped, and I was too embarrassed and ashamed of myself to tell anyone. I didn't think I deserved justice for what Red did to me. Later on, I found out my obstacles from the injury, hearing loss in my right ear, as well as an inability to retain old memories. This event and a flash of memories from my childhood are the last things I remember from before the incident. Though I was saddened by this, I was happy to be alive and to never see Red again. Now being 18, a few months ago I signed up for Plenty of Fish once more. I kept my wariness this time though, and didn't actually go on any dates. I looked out for warning signs, and upon the first blocked just about everyone. One day I received a message, and I could see it was from Red. I had blocked him on any other platform, including his number. It simply said, "Hey, how have you been?" I didn't respond, but I looked at his profile. It still said he was 26 years old. I had a feeling he lied to me about his real age. Perhaps I didn't know anything about this man at all. After all, he must have thought he killed me, and he still selfishly ran off without even attempting to see if I was still alive. This is something that happened to me a month ago. It's still fresh in my mind, and quite frankly, still gives me the chills whenever I go into work to this day. Some background before I go into this story. I'm a female who also happens to be gay. I have a girlfriend, and we both had promise rings. Rings that we show off to anybody that leans toward the flirtier side or tells us they want to take us out on a date or something like that. Anyway, I work at a small mom-and-pop coffee shop in a small community. There's a few coworkers and a lovely boss that treats all of us very well. We all got along well and even went out together outside of work just to hang out and have a good time. There was one coworker that I was rather close to, and am now even closer to this day, Matt. Matt is a tall guy, taller than me even, and I'm 6 foot. He had a slim but muscular build. He was a super nice guy, and we've been great friends ever since he started working at the shop with us. We get all sorts of people coming in there, mostly middle class or upper class people that tend to be very nice, apart from the picky, entitled assholes, of course. There were also a few strangers that blow in from out of town from time to time. No big deal. We had a regular come in almost every weekend. I'll call him James. James was a rather good-looking guy, however, a lot older than I was. Let's say that I'm old enough to be in college, but not quite old enough to drink yet. According to my boss, he came around the shop about once every other week to treat himself, but ever since I'd started working there, he came in every weekend to buy a small coffee or some random pastry to snack on. My boss joked, saying it must be because he had a crush on me. I laughed it off at the time, but I probably should not have. Whenever I was at the register, he would get this huge smile on his face and ask me about my day. I would reply with the standard small talk and make his order so I could continue doing whatever else I had to do. If I wasn't at the register though, he would wait until I was done doing whatever I was doing so I could cater to him only. He refused to let anybody but me help him at the register. I thought that was a little weird and had some small red flags going off, but not enough for me to really get paranoid. Then he started asking me the snooping personal questions though. He would ask me about where I was going to school, if I lived in the neighborhood that was 5 minutes away, what my favorite flowers were. At this point, I was uncomfortable with all his questions and gave very vague answers. I just outright ignored the prodding about my favorite flowers and what school I went to. I casually brought up that my girlfriend and I were planning to go on a date at some point. I even showed him the ring she gave to me so he could see very well it wasn't just some made-up thing. His entire attitude immediately changed. He went from all smiles to a straight face and monotone voice as he snatched his coffee from me and briskly walked out the door. I felt triumphant. I figured that would be the end of it. I volunteered to take out the trash to the large bins outside. The back of the shop was surrounded by other buildings that were also little restaurants and bars. They all used the same bins, and it was rare to encounter anybody else when you're going out to dump the trash bags. Sometimes the other workers would be out having a smoke, but that wasn't until later at night, and the coffee shop usually closed around 5 in the afternoon. I went outside at around 1. As I was lugging the large bags outside, I noticed a man standing in the center of the sidewalk a few feet away. Tons of people walked their dogs around that area, so I didn't really think twice about it. That was until I took a double take after throwing the bags in the bin. It was James. He was just standing there staring at me, and with my chronic anxiety and paranoia, something in me told me I needed to stop looking and start booking back to the shop. Just as I turned around to start fast walking back, I heard large lunging footsteps running toward me, and I instantly picked up speed. Right as I bolted up the steps and opened the door to the shop, I turned around and slammed it. I saw James was right behind me, and about to stop the door until I shut it. I locked it behind me, hyperventilating due to the panic attack that was coming. Matt was working with me that day and heard me crying and struggling to breathe in the back. He called my girlfriend for me so she could help calm me down. Although I'm taller than her, she was definitely the tough one out of the two of us. She could take a man twice her size due to all the training she'd done since she was a kid, whereas I didn't know how to fight at all. I relayed back to her what had happened, and of course she was livid. She couldn't come over though due to her being still at work, so she asked Matt to help me process what happened as we continued working. Over the next few weeks, James would come back and act like nothing had happened at all. One week though, he just stopped coming altogether. He didn't come in for another 3 weeks. I was getting nervous because something told me he was cooking up something really big and really bad. Now, I only worked weekends at this point due to me being in school. Matt worked both weekends and 2 days during the week, so I asked him to see if James would be coming in those 2 days. He obliged and said he would let me know. I didn't get any texts during the week, and a feeling of dread was building up in my chest that I had to work that weekend. Friday, just as I was opening the shop, alone mind you, the next person would not be coming in until half an hour after me. In walks James. Technically, we didn't even open until the second person comes in, but we sometimes let a couple of customers in early, since they only want their coffee of the day and then take off. That meant the stupid front door was already unlocked. I was terrified to my very core. I never open alone, and the one time I did, James somehow knew this and took it as his chance. As I saw him walking up, I texted to my boss to look at the cameras and tell Matt to hurry up because I did not want to be alone with this guy. He started his usual small talk and I obliged, not wanting to set him off. He started going on about how pretty I was, comparing me to random models. I just kind of nodded and thanked him. His demeanor switched again. He wasn't straight-faced, nor did he change his tone, but there was something in his eyes that told me he was calculating what he was going to do next, depending on how I answered. Now, I'm not a quick thinker when under pressure, especially not when I'm scared like this. I did mention that James was good-looking and older, but he was also way more muscular than I was. I knew that if he was going to grab me, I had to do everything I could to wiggle my chubby self out of his grasp. If he jumped over the counter or tried to run around the back, I'd have to grab one of the knives we used when making the food. He started saying how he wanted to take me out, and he would treat me so much better than this so-called girlfriend of mine, that I should call her and break up with her right now. That took me by surprise, and he knew by the look on my face, because this time he slammed his fist against the counter and screamed, "Call the bitch right now or you'll fucking regret it." I was on the verge of tears. I picked up my phone, opening Matt's contact and calling him, praying he would pick up. Someone or something must have been on my side that day because he picked up on the very first ring. "Hello? Hey baby, there's something I need to tell you." "What? What are you talking about?" I was sweating, trying not to look at James too much, as he seemed pretty satisfied I'd actually listened to him, his arms crossed as I held back my tears. "I know we've been dating for a while now, but there's a guy I met at the shop and it made me realize I don't think I can keep this relationship up with you anymore." Matt instantly picked up on how shaky my voice was and the small innuendo I made that I was not alone right now. I could hear him running down the stairs of his house and jingling his car keys. "Don't hang up the phone, I'm coming. That fucking prick is gonna get what's coming to him." Matt lived in the same neighborhood I did, which was only a few minutes away. I prayed to whoever that he was breaking every speed limit out there to back me up. "I know you're upset. No, it isn't you, it's me." I paused now and then acted like there was a legit conversation happening. The longer I stayed on the phone, though, the more suspicious James had started to become. He uncrossed his arms and started making his way towards the small opening that led to the area where we worked. My skin was crawling as I tried to act like I was going to abruptly end the call. I hung up the phone and put my phone back in my pocket, raising my hands to show I wasn't going to do anything. The way James was looking at me, I'd only ever encountered that look once. It was something I never wanted to see again. I simply shook my head, my eyes now and then quickly looking towards the front to spot Matt's car. For a moment, it was just a heavy silence hanging in the air. Then, before I knew it, James was throwing the small knickknacks on the counter at me in a fit of rage. He was screaming that I should have never had a girlfriend in the first place. It should have always been him. I panicked and grabbed one of the knives in the drawer, putting some distance between him and I. "I'm gay, you moron. I like girls. I don't want your saggy, limp, microscopic Spit was flying out of my mouth as the adrenaline slowly turned into anger. I was so mad my glasses started to fog up before James could even hop the counter, and he looked like he was ready to murder me. The back door slammed open. Matt came in holding a metal bat. He shouted that if the man didn't get the fuck out right now before the cops arrived, he would gladly beat the shit out of him. I instantly ran over to Matt and stood behind him. Just as James was about to lunge for the both of us, the red and blue lights outside made him think twice. He bolted towards the back door. Matt tried to block him, but it didn't work. Just as the cops burst inside, James was already gone. By then, I was a shaking mess. The adrenaline that had been holding me together was now completely gone. I fell to the floor and started to sob. Matt once again called my girlfriend, who thankfully was off that day and rushing from her place in the city to come see me. One of the cops tried their best to calm me down, while the other was talking to Matt and asking for a description, telling us another car was patrolling the area and trying to find him. Apparently, he had come to the shop on foot. They found his car parked several streets away from the center where all the restaurants were. My boss came in as soon as they could and handed over the security footage they had gotten from that morning. I was allowed to go home for the rest of the day. I chose to go to my girlfriend's place just in case. They told me that if I ever saw James in my area or my girlfriend's area, to not hesitate to call them again. My boss also posted his face outside the shop as well as inside to let people know that if they saw this man to call the police and that he was not allowed to be inside, especially during weekends. It just makes me think that if Matt didn't live so close by, if I hadn't stalled the man for as long as I had, what would he have done to me? Would he have hurt me in the shop? Or dragged me all the way back to his car and taken me somewhere else? I truly believe this man had something sinister planned for me. Let me preface this story with a few things. I'm not the best writer and I've not shared this before, nor do a lot of people know this even happened to me. I'm turning 22 at the end of the month, and this event happened almost a decade ago. I still remember it so clearly though. I still think on it often and bring it up to my family, as uncomfortable as it makes all of us. It reminds us of how dangerous the world really is. As a little bit of backstory, growing up I'd always had extremely fair skin, blonde hair, and light eyes. The kind of thing that specific creeps really go for. When I was just around the bend of becoming a teenager, my older sister, who was 8 years ahead of me, was in the military and had been gone for quite some time now. Soon though, she was finally coming back home to old USA soil, a few states away at a base in Kentucky. My parents and I were very excited and planned to leave for the weekend. We could finally go see her for the first time in years. It would only be for a few days, but we were happy regardless. We ended up spending time with her, of course, and had a few days to be able to go out to eat, open her accumulated Christmas presents, and go to a nearby mall in proximity to the hotel we'd been at. I've never seen someone so happy just to wear regular civilian clothes. I digress though. Right from the get-go, our last night together felt odd as we walked this mall. I guess it was just one of those creepy vibes you get when in an unfamiliar area. It wasn't too long until closing, and at this time frame, malls closed at about 10 p.m. or so. I'm sure you know what happens at malls. You go in and you look at everything. Unbeknownst to us at the time, the four of us came across the last store we would be stopping at for the night before leaving. We walked in, and it was not a particular store we'd usually go to, something about expensive streetwear clothing. Being the pesky 12-year-old I was going back and forth pestering my mom and dad while walking around the store, as my sister looked around as well. Suddenly, my sister walked over to my mother and whispered something in her ear. A man with the most well-defined black mustache I can remember had been tailing us and doing the typical retail routine. "Hi, is there anything I can help you with? Can I help you find anything?" He was being a little too persistent though, and only ever asking my dad these things. The man didn't quite speak broken English, but his accent was very thick. Perhaps Indian or Turkish maybe. My sister and mother walked out of the store and kept eyeing back at my dad. They were giving him the "all right, let's go now" look. Me being 12, I was feeling even worse vibes. I didn't understand why my mom and sister were wanting to leave so badly, but I went to catch up with them regardless. As my dad noticed us all leaving, he began to walk out as well, but the man stopped him as I was still in earshot. I found out this man had been staring at me almost the whole time. He looked away from me, back to my dad, and then asked him this: "How much for the little one?" My dad, visibly confused, chuckled uncomfortably, thinking it was some kind of really tasteless joke. My mother and sister didn't hear this and were still waiting for myself and my dad to catch up several feet away. "What?" My dad furrowed his brow and replied, hoping for some kind of explanation. The man proceeded to say he wanted to purchase me. Visibly angry now and realizing the man was completely serious, he said, "We don't do that here." He started hurrying me away to my mom and sis, and we started leaving as he told them what just happened. The whole drive back to the hotel, my sister was getting consistently more upset, saying if she'd have known, she would have killed the fucker. Honestly, I'm not sure there's really anything we could have done though. Regardless, the entire situation was entirely fucked up, especially now that I'm old enough to realize the implications of what was going on.